Washington Commanders head coach Dan Quinn mixed no words in telling us on Thursday before the joint practice with Miami Dolphins that the number 2 receiver job is wide open. And my favorite for that job is not Jahan Dotson. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody, and welcome into today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, David Harrison, credentialed member of the media, covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. Here with you every Monday through Friday. Greatly appreciate you coming through today. Everydayers greatly appreciate you coming through every single day. On today's episode, we got a lot to talk about. The defense, Washington Commanders defense, getting after the Miami Dolphins quarterbacks. We're also going to talk about Jayden Daniels' 2-interception day, but we're all going to start it off with Jahan Dotson, not solidified, not even close to solidified, as the number 2 receiver in Washington. Of course, if you want to discuss any of that, anything else from today's episode or anything else Washington Commanders related, all you got to do is text me by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Become a Locked On Commanders insider today. You can text me, and I will be texting you news and notes throughout the day, the week, from practices, from games, from press conferences, all of that good stuff. Just join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more with FanDuel, hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus all summer long. Go to FanDuel.com today to get started. Jahan Dotson, presumed the number 2 receiver and the Washington Commanders depth chart heading into training camp, heading into this offseason and everything else. Really, the top topics of conversation were who was going to be the third receiver that was going to complement Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin. But now the question has gradually grown into, and on Thursday got a violent shove into the deep end of the question pool surrounding, is Jahan Dotson actually wide receiver number 2? Because right now, he does not look like wide receiver number 2. In fact, to me, if I had to stack the depth chart today for the regular season, it would be Olamide Zaccheaus, the veteran who came over from the Philadelphia Eagles, previously spent time with the Atlanta Falcons. And no, it's not because of the Dan Quinn Atlanta Falcons connection. It's because Olamide Zaccheaus, bottom line, point blank, has been more consistently open and connecting with quarterback Jaden Daniels. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter who you put in a vacuum and say which receiver is more athletically gifted, which receiver has the highest upside, which receiver has the biggest ceiling or the most star potential between anybody. At the end of the day, who connects best with the quarterback in the offensive scheme that we're trying to execute, that is what determines who's going to be more successful, what's going to be more successful for the team. And right now, bottom line is, guys, that is Olamide Zaccheaus. And I've got to give a big shout out, a lot of credit to Seawall, Candy Waller of Bowie TV, Seawall Entertainment, Sports Entertainment, all that stuff. She has been talking about Jahan Dotson potentially not being the number 2 receiver on the Washington Commanders depth chart for weeks now, for over 2 weeks. I'll tell you that. And she actually asked a question to offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury about Jahan Dotson, kind of his status. And Cliff Kingsbury's body language got a little bit weird when he got asked the question, kind of talked about Jahan finding a spot in the offense and comfortability and all that stuff. Dan Quinn talking about Jahan Dotson's comfortability and all that stuff. And Jahan Dotson himself in some interviews talking about getting his confidence back and all these things. So just a lot of signs pointing to Jahan Dotson's spot on this depth chart, not necessarily being solidified. I think we all, and I say we all, but I'm talking mostly about myself because you're not here having this conversation. So that's on me for having this conversation. Kind of penciled him in as that number 2 receiver a little bit prematurely before we really saw this thing taking shape. And Olamide Zaccheaus, again, like I said, has just kind of been really showing up for Jaden Daniels and for his offense on a very consistent basis. On Thursday, when asked about that second receiver job, head coach Dan Quinn said, quote, "I would say we're right in the middle of it being the search for the number 2 wide receiver. And so you'll see a lot of guys in today. You'll see 2, 3, 4, 5. There's a lot of guys that are really battling. I've been really impressed with wide receiver Olamide Zaccheaus, and I thought he's had a really strong camp. I'm looking forward to getting Luke McCaffrey some extra work into here, and Jahan Dotson, De'Ami Brown. So that's where we're at. And then the special teams is going to have a factor in that as well." End quote. So Dan Quinn very, very clearly, obviously saying that the number 2 wide receiver has not been determined. I mean, Terry McLaurin has done nothing to give any shaky ground or doubt that he's going to be the number 1 wide receiver. So that number 2 receiver really is kind of the guy in question. Olamide Zaccheaus on Thursday against the Miami Dolphins in joint practice, getting the bulk of, if not all of the quote unquote second perimeter wide receiver spots or snaps for the offense. Jahan Dotson almost exclusively, if not exclusively, in the slot. So that kind of brings up the next question of how much does being number two or being number three truly matter? Because at the end of the day, when you're looking at slot receivers, I think Jahan Dotson still kind of comes away as that best slot receiver option for the Washington Commanders. So even if Olamide Zaccheaus is the quote unquote number two receiver next to Terry McLaurin, that's fine. But for the most part, you're going to have three receivers on the field, and Jahan Dotson is going to be that third guy who's in the slot for the Washington Commanders. Now, behind him, you, of course, have a guy like Luke McCaffrey, who has slot experience, but also has been working on the outside for the Washington Commanders and certainly could compete for at least some reps and prove himself worthy of getting some time even during the regular season. De'Ami Brown, of course, made the incredible reception and connection with Jaden Daniels in the preseason game against the New York Jets for the 42-yard gain. But truthfully, De'Ami Brown has been kind of a hot and cold guy where he shows up sometimes and some days he kind of disappears and you almost kind of forget that he's on the field during training camp practices. So again, consistency is kind of the key here because with Jahan, we talked about it just about a week and a half or a couple weeks ago. We had a really solid day of practice. I mean, brought in 6-7 passes from Jaden Daniels, was all over the field, made some acrobatic catches, made some going to the ground, really looked to kind of take a step in the Cliff Kingsbury offense. And a lot of us were kind of talking about at the time, like, okay, it took a little bit of time for him to get rolling, but now we see that things are starting to click. But then he also faded away after that. And then, of course, getting so many reps, as many reps as he got in the first preseason game, a lot of people taking note of that and kind of drawing conclusions to say, look, Jahan Dotson's job may be a little bit in jeopardy, at least as far as where he's going to be on the depth chart. He's going to be on this team, right? Like, barring any unforeseen trades or anything, which I don't predict that there's going to be a trade or anything coming for the Washington Commanders. I just, he's going to be on this team. He's going to be on this roster. The question is, where is he going to be on the roster, on the depth chart? Where is he going to be in the pecking order? And right now, bottom line up front, it just is not looking solid that he's going to be that number two guy. So more on that. We'll obviously follow that as we go. Jahan Dotson did do a scrum with us after practice, and he was asked a lot of questions, talked a lot about kind of getting his confidence back and doing those types of things. Sam Fortier sent out a tweet and a TikTok video saying he talked to Jahan, and Jahan said he wasn't, upset or concerned about having to compete for the number two job because that's kind of what this staff has kind of talked about. And then, of course, Brian Mitchell on the radio recently was talking about seeing some receivers or seeing receivers, didn't say, any names or anything like that, and is not giving out names today. He was talking about that a little bit today. People were talking to him more so about his comments and wasn't going to give any names specifically, but just kind of talking about, these guys needing to understand that this is a new day. This is a new Commanders team. And if you're going to be a part of the success they're trying to grow, you're going to have to do it the right way. Nothing's going to be given to you and nothing is going to be just, well, you've got the athletic upside, so you're going to go ahead and get that job. So we will continue to keep our eye on Jahan Dotson. And of course, that second receiver battle, Dan Quinn also told us that he does expect Jahan Dotson to get similar amount of reps on Saturday against the Miami Dolphins. So you're going to see plenty of number one out there on the field. How much of number five are you going to see on the field? I don't think you're going to see a whole lot after we got a lot of reps out of Jaden Daniels on Thursday in the joint practice against the Miami Dolphins, but you will get some. However, our day 14, eye on the Tiger. Jaden Daniels completing 69% of his passes and throwing 2 interceptions, but actually had a pretty solid day. I'll explain to you why coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode and this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you go to the gym a lot and you never skip leg day. Maybe you meditate every single day to kind of get centered and hone in on what calms you down. Maybe you do yoga every single day, or maybe you do therapy on a regular basis every day, on occasion, whatever it is, and you never miss therapy day. When your schedule is packed with kids' activities, big work projects, friends and family pulling you in every single direction, it is easy to let your own personal priorities slip because even though you know what makes you happy, it's hard sometimes to make time for it. In fact, sometimes you feel guilty doing things that are for you because it makes you feel a little bit selfish. Talking to someone who has that third-party view, unbiased, doesn't have any concern over whether you're being selfish or unselfish, could really help you put things in perspective because it's important to take care of yourself. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You fill out a brief questionnaire, and then you'll get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/locked-on today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked-on. Jaden Daniels completed less than 70% of his pass attempts in team drills on Thursday and threw 2 interceptions. But I'm telling you, he had a pretty good day. I'm going to explain to you why. Thanks for making Locked On Commanders your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast so you can get daily insight on the best fantasy football draft strategies that'll help you win your league. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, officially on the books, Jaden Daniels, 69% completion rating on day 14 of training camp / preseason, this joint training practice against the Miami Dolphins. Let me drop this BetterHelp banner, although thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring today's episode and the show. Jaden Daniels completing 11 of 16 pass attempts, and again, 2 interceptions, was sacked a couple of times as well, but overall, a very solid day. So the very first team session that the Washington Commanders Miami Dolphins partook in was a red zone drill. They were in the red zone on both ends of the field and basically just working on plays to try to score from inside the red zone. And as Washington fans, you know very, very well that this team needs a lot of improving on scoring in the red zone if they're going to actually turn this thing around and become a successful organization. Very first pass of the red zone drill fell incomplete as a right side fade route thrown to Olamide Zaccheaus. Speaking of, was overthrown out of the end zone, uncatchable by OZ. Second pass, however, was completed to wide receiver Terry McLaurin, who ran a middle dig route in the back of the end zone against cornerback Kendall Fuller, familiar name there, for a touchdown. Third pass was also completed. It was a back shoulder end zone throw to Jamison Crowder for another touchdown. And this was actually my play of the day for my Sports Illustrated notebook that I wrote following practice. And I just love the look of it because Jamison Crowder goes up against the Dolphins defensive back, runs, basically gives the DB a fade look, right? He's running like he's running a fade route. But as they get into kind of that fade route, it's a fade stop, right? He stops his route, turns around, and the ball is already falling down into his arms because Jaden Daniels was a perfect back shoulder throw back towards the inside or the near side right corner of the end zone. Dolphins DB could do nothing but just kind of watch it unfold. Next pass was also completed, a left side corner route to rookie receiver Luke McCaffrey. Good to see him getting involved in there for another touchdown. Fifth pass also completed, a slant route to Terry McLaurin for a touchdown. Look, I don't know if it actually happened. I swear, and I was looking through my binoculars because the way the Miami Dolphins practice facility is, we were actually sitting in the bleachers, and we're sitting in the bleachers, and there's a football field where the Dolphins offense is going through the Commanders defense. I've got some notes from that, although obviously I was watching the Commanders offense more closely. And then the next field is where the Commanders offense is, and they're all the way on the other side of the field down in that red zone. So, I'm really far away, but I'm looking through my binoculars. I could have swore that ball grazed or deflected off of an offensive lineman's helmet. Either way, Terry McLaurin brought the ball in, whether it deflected off somebody or not, for another touchdown. And then finally, sixth pass of the red zone series also completed. This one to tight end John Bates, who was getting first team tight end reps with Zach Ertz out. More on that here in just a little bit. That was in the back of the end zone. That was an extended play by Jaden Daniels and eventually found his tight end for another touchdown. So if you're counting, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight touchdown passes. There were some run plays and all that stuff in the red zone set, but 5 straight touchdown passes by Jaden Daniels in his first 11-on-11 set of the day. That's pretty darn good, and 5 for 6 total inside the red zone. That's exactly the type of red zone offense you're going to want to see from the Washington Commanders. It doesn't guarantee you're going to see that all the time, but you're going to see it, from time to time, hopefully. Good news, too. Andrew Wiley, right tackle, back there in the 11-on-11s again. You heard from him on our last episode. He said he's feeling good, expects to go, and he certainly did. Now, in the second team set, Chris Paul came in as the right tackle. First pass of that set fell incomplete over the middle. Next one was completed to the left side. Again, another extended play by Jaden Daniels, and it was a throw a little bit high, but to Luke McCaffrey. Third one also completed right side to Jamison Crowder, and that's when the first sack came in on the fourth drop back for Jaden Daniels. Mark Perry, Dolphin safety, came in, got in for the sack. Fourth pass attempt was completed to Terry McLaurin on a comeback route, and then another sack on the sixth drop back of the day, or of the set rather, cornerback Kader Kohu of the Miami Dolphins coming in for the sack. So, and I will tell you this, that even though, Chris Paul was the starting right tackle or the first team right tackle for that set, not all the pressure was on Chris Paul. And actually, Chris Paul looked a lot better as that right tackle than he did, in my opinion, against the Jets last Saturday. So for what that's worth, certainly in just 5 days difference a little bit of growth coming out of Chris Paul, and hadn't played tackle since his college days, so maybe needed a little bit of breaking off the rust there on the edge for the Washington Commanders. Third team set, Andrew Wiley back in at right tackle. First pass was completed, a quick out route to Jahan Dotson. Second pass was a dump off to Austin Eckler. Would have been absolutely clean. Like, there was a Dolphin safety that absolutely would have just destroyed him, but it's practice, so he didn't actually hit him because he's, it's a fraternity of football players, right? So 2 for 2. Third pass, sorry, was incomplete down the seam to John Bates. Another incompletion came after that, and then an interception when Cole Turner was hit on the seam route. So Cole Turner is running a seam route up the field, and Jaden Daniels throws the ball in a way that Cole Turner's got to turn around and make the catch, but it puts it in a position where only the tight end can catch it, and it allows him to protect the ball with his body, which Cole Turner does, brings in the pass, but then the Dolphins DB hits him from the back. And when he hits Cole Turner, the ball goes popping up in the air. There's 3 Dolphins defenders in the area when the ball goes up, and there's just no other result than Cole Turner or than the ball being intercepted. The Dolphins defense even actually started celebrating before the ball was actually intercepted because it was just that easy of an interception. And for Cole Turner, there's certainly not a play that he wants to put on tape. More on him here in just a little bit. The fourth team session for Jaden Daniels on the day, we actually moved indoors because of how hot it was. Trent Scott was the starting right tackle, or the first team right tackle. And the first pass of that set was the only pass of that set because it was intercepted by Kendall Fuller. Terry McLaurin running a left side out route slipped in his route. And because it's an out route, Jaden Daniels had to throw it on time. So the ball's already in the air when Terry goes down. Kendall Fuller brings in the easy interception. And it was a late game scenario, which means late game, game's over, use lost. So the teams ended the practice there. So again, 69% on the day. However, if you take out the receiver mistakes, right, and then when you hear Jaden Daniels through 2 interceptions, that's the important part. Look, in the stat box, Jaden Daniels threw 2 interceptions. On your fantasy team, Jaden Daniels threw 2 interceptions. But in reality, in context, when you're looking at the tape, when you're looking at what happened here on the practice field, Cole Turner dropped the pass, popped it up. Terry McLaurin slipped on the grass. I don't necessarily. I'm not going to harp on Terry McLaurin slipping. It happens from time to time. They move from the outside to the inside. Probably would have used different spikes, different cleats in an inside turf surface. Maybe it was more slippery, whatever it was. The Dolphins didn't have any slippery, slipping incidences or anything like that in their, late game set. But it is what it is. I'm not going to sit here and harp too much on Terry McLaurin. But for Cole Turner, it's a little bit of a different story. So we'll get into Cole Turner here in just a little bit. If you take away those mistakes, both those passes would have been completed without those receiver errors. That's 13 for 16. That's 81%. So completable passes, Jaden Daniels, 81% on the day. That's pretty stinking good. On top of it, on the other field, again, I was mostly watching the offense because obviously I'm charting everything that Jaden Daniels is doing. But here's the beauty of being in a media group, right? Everybody's kind of working together. And on Thursday, the Miami Dolphins media group actually was really helping me out because as I'm putting the binoculars on, watching Jaden Daniels on the far field, I'm hearing the Dolphins media going, "That's a sack. 93 got in. That's a sack. 92 got in. That's a sack. 93 and 94 got in. That's a pressure. 94 got in. That's a pressure. 19. Noah Igbenogany, former Miami Dolphins cornerback, would have got in." So as I'm sitting here watching and charting Jaden Daniels and the Commanders' offense, I'm like, man, like I am hearing these guys talk about this front getting a lot of pressure on a lot of reps here. So Jonathan Allen, Dorrance Armstrong, Daron Payne, again, Noah Igbenogany getting in on it. A lot of pressure being generated on that Miami Dolphins front. And then between snaps here and there, I was able, and when Jeff Driscoll came in to get second team reps, I was able to watch the defense myself. And yeah, those guys were flying around, being very, very aggressive. Andre Jones got involved in a little bit of a shoving, fighting match, headbutted a Miami Dolphin so hard it knocked his own helmet off, things like that. Big hit. There was a big hit by Tyler Owens, the undrafted rookie safety out of Texas Tech. So a lot of good play by the defense. The Dolphins did get some plays in. I wouldn't say that either team ran away with winning, today's practice, but the Commanders a much better showing against Miami Dolphins than they had against the New York Jets. We have some other practice notes as well to wrap up today's episode, including the offensive line looking improved today in joint training camp practices against the Miami Dolphins. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. You love sports. We both love sports. We want them to never, ever stop. Most likely, you love football more than you love other sports. If you're here listening to this podcast, I love football, just be quite honest with you, more than other sports. But between the football season ending and the football season beginning, there's some key moments: NFL scouting combine, Senior Bowl, and NFL draft, all those things. But there is certainly a stretch and a period where the sports simply just stop sportsing the way that I want them to, and the way that some of you probably want them to as well. But FanDuel has made a big effort this summer to make sure that all sports fans, especially football lovers, are completely engaged all summer long. And they've been giving customers a boost or a daily bonus every single day, all summer long. So new customers, you've been getting $150 in bonus bets with winning $5 bets. Every Tuesday is Dinger Tuesday. Go to fanduel.com. Start making the most out of your summer with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. We're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders. No player interviews today. We did record some player interviews, but we had a lot of stuff to talk about on today from the joint practice in Miami, where I am currently sitting in my luxurious hotel room here in beautiful Miami, Florida. So we're going to talk about some of the other notes. Tomorrow, there's no practice. I've still got an episode to do, so I'm going to use those videos in my Friday episode. So keep an eye out for that. That will be coming out. But I figure we'll use the rest of this episode to talk about some other key things, including the offensive line improvement. So we talked about Jahan Dotson, the number 2 receiver job. We talked about Jayden Daniels' day. We talked about the defenders, or the Washington Commanders defensive front, really getting after the Miami Dolphins offense today on Thursday. Now let's talk about the offensive line improvements. And I kind of already touched on it, right? But Cornelius Lucas at left tackle, Brandon Coleman was there, padded, doing his own kind of workout on the side, not participating in individual drills, not participating in team drills. But you still like that the young guy is there. He's in pads. He's doing his thing. Andrew Wiley at right tackle, he's back now. There was a rotation there. Again, Chris Paul got some reps there. Trent Scott got some reps there as well. But just going from Trent Scott at left tackle, Chris Paul at right tackle, to Cornelius Lucas at left tackle, Andrew Wiley at right tackle, already there was a pronounced improvement in the offensive line play. And I mean significant, like very, very significant. And what Jaden Daniels, to me, has proven so far is that he is a quarterback, as young as he is, if he's given time. And he doesn't need 10 seconds. I mean, you love 10 seconds, right? But doesn't need 10 seconds. But if you give him 2.5 to 3.5 seconds, 4 would be great. He is going to find a way to get the ball somewhere it can be effective, either by throwing it to an open receiver or by running the ball. Now, in practice, he's not running as much, which I think we all want to see. We want to see him focus on getting the ball out as a passer. But we know in games that's certainly an option for him. And with Cornelius Lucas and Andrew Wiley, they were able to do that much more than we saw last week against the New York Jets. So already it's a very significant improvement. Brandon Coleman, before he got injured, was doing better than Cornelius Lucas in training camp. So when he comes back, if that improvement happens again, I don't know, guys. This offensive line might be a little bit better than maybe some of us have given them credit for once we see the starting 5. The problem is we haven't seen the starting 5, or the presumed starting 5, right? Tyler Biadasz, Nick Allegretti, Sam Cosmi, Andrew Wiley, and Brandon Coleman. That set of 5 has never taken a team snap together, because when Brandon Coleman was out there starting to get his reps, Andrew Wiley was sitting out team reps. Now that Andrew Wiley is back, Brandon Coleman's out. So we have yet to see our presumed starting 5 offensive linemen on the field at the same time. But some encouraging stuff against one practice, so don't get too carried away with it. We'll see what happens on the game, or in the game on Saturday as well. But right now, very encouraging sign watching those guys go up against the Dolphins pass rush. Let's get back to Cole Turner a little bit and his status. Insider Bill came through and said it was really encouraging to get the text message that there were some seam routes being run by tight ends. Mentioned Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski, the experience there and the success with seam routes there. And yeah, I really enjoy it too. Jayden Daniels throws it really well. He's really smart on where he puts the ball and all those things. But for Cole Turner, here's the thing. We talked about Cole Turner a lot, and I got a question from a couple insiders on Cole Turner's status coming up into this practice and then after this practice. And my thing is this: we haven't really seen a large boost or upgrade in Cole Turner's blocking ability, and that's really his biggest bugaboo on why he's not more involved in this offense the last couple of years. But when your primary skill is catching passes, you have to catch those passes. And again, it's one mistake, it's one drop pass bobbled up into the air that results in interception. But here's the thing: when you're battling for the last roster spot on a team, because make no mistake about it, guys, right now, your top 3 tight ends are Zach Ertz, John Bates, Ben Sinnott. That's it. Those are your top 3. There's no competition there. There is a competition, but there's in a results-based conversation, there's no competition. Cole Turner is a is the fourth tight end. So what Cole Turner is trying to do is show the Washington Commanders that there's a reason to keep four tight ends. He's not really doing it as a blocker. In fact, when he does get really aggressive as a blocker, he's been getting flagged a lot in practices. So when your biggest strength is being a receiver, and your strength as a receiver is so much bigger than your ability as a blocker, you're the fourth tight end, you can't afford even one popped up ball. Like it is that real for a guy in Cole Turner's position. Like let's just be honest about it. Like Terry McLaurin slips one time, honestly nobody flinches. Like it happens. It happens to the best. But you're Terry McLaurin. You've done plenty of things in your career that nobody's going to look at one slipping on the field and say, "Oh man, you might need to get rid of him." But if you're Cole Turner, you can't have the blocking deficiencies that you have, the penalty issues that you've been having in training camp so far, and now also add in dropping the football even one time. That's got to be something. Cole Turner's got to come into the game on Saturday and put that to bed, because if he has any more issues like that, it's going to get really bad really really fast. And I don't want to be overly dramatic, but the bottom line is Cole Turner is looking to fight for a fourth tight end spot. He's basically competing against himself, and it's either going to be Cole Turner as the fourth tight end, or they're only keeping three tight ends. So again, you got to give them a reason to keep that fourth tight end. Quarterback Trace McSorley, we talked to him as well, so you'll hear from him on tomorrow's episode. He officially signed with the Washington Commanders, flew in from New Jersey, had to cram as much as he could. But I had a question, why Trace McSorley? And I'll tell you, Trace, look, he's a camp body, right? You'll actually hear in the interview, I asked him about Dan Quinn, just kind of his initial, response to him or whatever. And he even says in there, if you notice, he's really looking forward to getting to spend the time he can with them in this short period. Basically, sounds like a dude who knows he's not here very long, right? So he takes the opportunity. He's going to get some paycheck. He's going to put some film down and do all those things. And of course, he wants to chase his NFL dream. But really, the reason Trace McSorley is here is because they need somebody to help take snaps while Sam Hartman heals. And he knows Cliff Kingsbury's playbook. He knows Cliff Kingsbury's style and language. That's the bottom line. They don't really need to train him up. They need to get him up to speed as much as possible so he can take some game reps on Saturday night. And then Sam Hartman is ready to come back for next week's preseason finale against New England Patriots. You might not even see Trace McSorley on the roster anymore. Some other practice notes. No Marcus Mariota. Coach Quinn said he's dealing with a light groin injury. If it was regular season, he'd be fine. He'd practice. He'd play if needed and all those things. But because it's preseason and training camp, go ahead and just give him the time off. Zach Ertz also didn't make the trip out to Miami. Coach Quinn didn't divulge his personal reasons. It is a personal reason, but he said it might be, or it's a very good personal reasons. And something that we do know is Zach Ertz's wife, Julie Ertz, is very, very pregnant. So I don't know if the baby's here or not. It's not my business. Zach Ertz and Julie Ertz will divulge that information if and when they decide to, but hopefully everything's going well back there with them. No, Johnny Newton did not make the trip. Also, Jordan McGee, injured linebacker, did not make the trip either. Both stayed back in Ashburn to get treatment. Again, Brandon Coleman was present in pads, no individual, no teamwork, but was working independently. Riley Patterson. So talking to kicker competitions, right? No other kicker in camp anymore. Riley Patterson's it. And he had himself a day on Thursday. I didn't see him miss a single field goal, and he nailed 3 of 3 field goal tries from 50-plus yards. So, hey, I don't know, man. Maybe getting the other kicker out of the room is exactly what he needed. And something of interest, something to watch, very few linebackers being used in kickoff coverage of practice today. I didn't really notice it in week 1 against the New York Jets, to be quite honest with you, but the Dolphins media was kind of talking about it, so it sparked my interest in it as well. There were some linebackers on the field from time to time, but mostly DBs and a few defensive ends and receivers. So something interesting to look at as NFL teams continue to evolve their kickoff coverage and return strategies in light of the new rules. That's going to wrap it up for today's episode. Come back tomorrow. You're going to hear from some of the players that we talked to after practice, including Trace McSorley, Jahan Dotson, and Daron Payne, and also Derek Forrest. We've got about 4 players that you're going to hear from, and I'm going to tell you what I want to see or what needs to be seen in the second preseason game of the year for the Washington Commanders. In the meantime, if you've got questions or comments, all you got to do is reach out and text me. Become a Locked On Commanders insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to do that today. Make the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast your next listen today and get your daily insight into the best fantasy draft strategies this season. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day. Thanks for coming through on a regular basis like you do. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I will see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.